we'll figure it out. And I do believe in when we're all on one accord and we genuinely have police relationships and building it through these community events that we all 7 of us here, we have to host, and we want to, it's great. And you really get to know the people, for the officers as people, not just the lieutenants, the sergeants, the chief. You get to know them, their heart. And yeah, so community policing and Chief Jacobson bringing all of that back, I know it's very beneficial because that's all I know from my police career, especially when I first got here. So seeing it coming back and now being on this side of it, this side of policing and the management staff, being able to host events and include the community, I just see great things happening for us. So that's all I wanted to include. If you have anything for me, please let me know.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you for your service.
Yes, sir.
And now Lieutenant Fumiati is going to go over Fairhaven started the year in December and January with a couple of fatal incidents, and we met with the alders, and we sat in a bunch of community meetings and listened to the community and reassured them, and we did some really good work, and he's going to go over that. But we know when we do have a violent surge that happened like that, we know how to stop it. You know, it's about getting enough cops out there so that it doesn't happen in the first place. It's about getting enough of the people that partake in it in custody so they can't do it in the first place. So, go ahead.
Thanks, Chief. Good evening, everyone. I'll try to keep it as brief as I can. So I just wanted to chat a little bit about how we had probably the most difficult month that I've had as a district manager in Fairhaven. So I've been the district manager in Fairhaven for, I think it's 4 years now. And so during that time, I had a lot of challenges. I've made a lot of really good relationships. And when the increase in violence happens, that's when we really lean on those relationships. And so what I've seen is, one, taking a look at a comprehensive plan with the community. How does the community want to be policed? How do the police, what is the presence that toes that line between over-policing and adequate needs of the community? And so what we did was we took a look at so there are 3 separate homicides. The end of the last homicide of 2022 and the first homicide of 2023 were both in Fairhaven. And so there was an increase in violence that I haven't seen the entire time I've been the district manager. And so one of the plans that we came up with was flooding the area with the motorcycle unit and conducting motor vehicle enforcement in areas that are prone to, one, both violence, gun violence specifically, but also motor vehicle accidents. And so we're able to achieve 2 goals by flooding that area with the newly expanded motorcycle unit. The feedback, so one, I want to put that out there to the community, take that enforcement action, but then get feedback for, is it effective? Is it working? Is it doing what we want it to be doing? And so largely the feedback was incredible. People were very happy to see, they reported that crime in the areas was down. We saw a statistic decline of crime in the area, so we know that what people are feeling is also indicative of the way people are reporting crime. And then also, we took a look at, during that time period, bringing walking beats to the area as well. And so you're generally, the motorcycle officers and the traffic officers are really only having an encounter with the person who they're pulling over in that situation. They remain professional and they take enforcement or don't take enforcement. But they're not really engaging with the community the way we want officers to engage in the community. They're achieving a different task. And so flooding the area with walking beats, specifically officers who know Fairhaven, who walk Fairhaven, who know the people that they're interacting with day in and day out, who know the community members. So we put those officers in the areas that where the violence happened. We talked a little bit about technology as well. 2 out of 3 of these homicides, we had the vehicle that was used in the homicide within minutes. That's unbelievable. And so like we had the vehicle description, we had a picture of the plate, and then we were able to run the license plate readers to see where these vehicles frequent. That's unheard of. Alder Antunes could probably attest to that years ago, we would never have that. You'd have to put detectives or officers out on the street. They would have to go door to door. They'd have to get video footage. And so to have officers have that data and that information immediately is incredible. Then officers are able to start looking for vehicles we're able to start looking for the offenders so that we are able to apprehend people who are who want to do violence against other people in the city. What's interesting about 2 out of the 3 homicides is we've already made arrests in 2 out of 3 of them. And so the increase of that technology on top of their relationships with the community, people are willing to come forward because they know the officers, because they know the detectives. Sergeant Sanders brought it up before. There have been multiple incidents where I've had people come to me and come to officers after we've had a coffee with a cop event or after we've done a community walk, and they say, I normally wouldn't come and tell you this, but because I met you last week, I had your phone number and I wanted to give you a call and tell you that this was going on in the community. That's exactly what this is all about. And so additionally, in response to the violence, we're also looking at how do we interact with people who are routinely traumatized by violence in their communities? And how are we're not just going in as officers in that moment and working through the stabilizing whatever traumatic incidents happening and investigating. We're looking at afterwards with partners like Clifford Beers and Yale Child Study and other community groups, clergy, going through and trying to develop relationships and see what people need outside of the traumatic incident that's been going on, and kind of checking in with them to see how they're responding, how their families are responding, what life is like day in and day out. There have been some incredibly meaningful relationships built, but also meaningful interactions where people are talking about real in-depth life issues that they're having that otherwise, if we hadn't gone and done that, we wouldn't have gotten that feedback. And so in Fairhaven, over the last couple of months, we have seen a significant reduction in violent crime. And so between enforcement, between building community events and relationships at community events, and then also engaging with partners, we've been able to, you can basically use the last few months as an example of how to stop violence, how to apprehend violent offenders, and then also how to engage with the community to help them feel safe. One of the things that I wanted to highlight too was how taxing.
Keep going.
So one of the things I wanted to emphasize was how taxing this is for officers. And so it's also, it's incredibly traumatic for the community, but it's also traumatic for the officers. And so what is one thing that we are seeing, and I've had 2 female officers from Fairhaven leave this year. And so I've invested a lot of time in them. I've had very candid conversations with them about why they were leaving. Just thinking off the top of my head about 2 incidents that one officer went to. There was a shooting where she was cradling one of the individuals in her arms. Not to be incredibly graphic, but there's blood everywhere. It's a very traumatic situation. There's a tourniquet application during that. She kind of had to process that and figure out how she was going to deal with that. Another incident, she responded to an overdose in which a very similar thing happened. And so officers are then going to other jurisdictions where that's not happening as much. They can make more money and they can go to a place where it's not going to be as busy as New Haven is. It's not going to be as violent. They're not going to be exposed to as much trauma. They're still going to be exposed to it. But and I think that's an interesting point. Another thing that is interesting too is that officers are routinely forced to stay a lot of extra shifts. And so I worked as a shift commander on New Year's Day. And so you would think it wouldn't be that busy of a day. Everyone's had their New Year's Eve festivities. And so everyone's sobering up and stumbling out of wherever they went into on New Year's Eve. New Year's Day should be a normal shift. We had to hold 12 officers over. And so it's a Sunday. They have plans with their families. They have things going on. And honestly, it was pretty difficult for me to decide to keep our minimum staffing. I have to look 12 people in the face and say, hey, you can't go home to your family. We have to keep you here for 16 hours. And that happens a lot in our department. And so I also give the officers a lot of credit, because then when the violence happens, they're still the ones who are picking up the overtime to come and walk the community, to come and engage, to have these meaningful relationships. And so I just think that's an important thing to bring up, that's a big piece of the puzzle here, as far as how do we keep officers here and how do we retain good quality community-based police officers. Thank you.
No, thank you for your service, and also thank you for your capture. That's a big part of what is helping reducing the crimes.
So just in conclusion, we did see a spike in the beginning of the year. Our our homicides are up. We have 6 right now. Last year at this time, we had 2. Our non-fatal shootings are exactly the same as last year, 19. One's too many, and we know that. But since that bad beginning to the year, this department and the officers of this department have seized 72 firearms off the street in less than 3 months. Last year at this time, it was 42. And last year, we had a record pace and ended up way over the most ever. So at this pace, which hopefully it's not, we're going to see the same. We've also made 5 murder arrests, where last year in the entire year we made 8. So we're already making progress. We've made 5 arrests for assault first, which means somebody was shot. And we've also made 4 arrests for attempted assault first. So we're getting a lot of work done, but it's a twofold situation. We need the walking beats to be out there. We need the community engagement. We need the community behind us, right? We've gone through a lot this year as a department, as a city. And I feel like we can get on the other side of that by deploying our officers in the manner that you guys want us to deploy them. And then on the flip side, we have the technology and the ability, to react quickly and make these arrests quickly, which we have done this year. This technology has blown away way better than I thought it would be. And as we train better and get better at it, and get better at the use of it, like Mike said, a bunch of these homicides, we had the vehicle used in it within minutes or hours. And that's where you start from. Last year we didn't have that ability, and now we do. So I liked what Sergeant Sanders said. We're coming out of a tough time, but I think we can get around the corner. It's our job to get more officers on the job, and we will. But we need to retain them, and the recruitment and retainment piece is heavy, and we need to be able to keep some of the, I hate to lose this guy at the end of the year. But the future is good. The future is good. And then the officers have reacted to a lot of these things that have happened, and are still 72 guns without having to shoot a suspect or hurt a suspect or anything. That's impressive to me. So I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to all of you, and we'll open it for questions. But I just feel like we're moving in the right direction and the plan is right. It's just about getting some more officers here so we can finish what we started.
Thank you. Before we take questions, I'd like to acknowledge Alder Yvette Hamilton has joined us. At this time, I will take questions from the committee. Alder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was saving my questions for the end, and appropriately so, because Lieutenant Fumiati started to pick up on it. I'll say this, we tend to lose officers in a number of different ways, the attrition, et cetera. But what is a concern in my mind is the example that you gave, where the officer decided to leave New Haven because of all the trauma and things they've seen. What are we doing to help these officers? They go to all kinds of incidents where it's really ugly, and that could work on an officer. Are there things in place right now to help them overcome that? Is there anything on a regular basis or treatment basis?
So we have mental health checks twice a year. We have our peer support team, where if anybody is subject to that type of trauma, they may have a debriefing with the peer support, which is required. Like, they have to show up, they don't have to talk, but you'll find a lot of the officers do talk. Mike has started the peer support dog program, so that will be kicking off. And like I said, we've tried to really highlight the good work of the officers, even the traumatic situations they're in, and have debriefings with them in the end, afterwards, within a week, hopefully. And that seems to work, but I don't think there's any fix-all. It's funny because some people react to that and say, this is what I signed up for. This is where I want to be because of what's going on. And then some people don't realize that they don't want to handle it. I will say we had a cadet, a field training officer who, after the Bristol officers were killed, he actually lived in Bristol. But after the Bristol officers were killed, he passed his FTO, he passed everything. he decided to leave the policing profession. Well, last month he reached out to me and asked if he could come back because he felt like he made a mistake and that's not who he is and he wants to come back. There's another officer that is also asking to come back as well. We'll take them back because we need them if they were good, right? But so I kind of feel like a tide is turning. But to answer your question, yes, we do have every 6 months we have mandatory sit downs with the city KGA who give wellness checks, and then they're mandatory yearly checks that are reported to the state with the police accountability bill.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from the committee? Alderman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, first, I'm assuming, Chief, that this tremendously content-filled report is online.
I'll put it online. I don't know if it is, but I'll put it on.
Because this is just so power-packed with information. I was hoping there might be some other questions before I spoke up, because my question is more based on more of a human resource management question, kind of a visionary question. And just hearing Lieutenant Elliott, not picking on you with this question, but you might perceive it to be stimulated by your comments. I'm not a police expert in terms of the retirement plan. As you know, state judges, 70 is the retirement age, private corporations, 65 you retire. Really not a pension expert. Let me get to my question. Is it conceivable in your mind, all of you four dedicated folks and all of your staff is dedicated, is it conceivable that that people will want to stay beyond 45 or 50 years old? Seems to me you have a lot of wisdom that you garner after these 20 years, and then for it not to be still manifested, passed down to the new generation. So I'm just curious from a structural standpoint, a McKinsey standpoint, a consultant standpoint, is it conceivable that the police industry might see ways that folks might want to stay longer? And to juxtapose that question, you mentioned the agility test. I mean, we do get older when we can't, but everyone, it seems to me that some of the job descriptions might not require as much agility physically and not to jeopardize your mental agility that you've garnered and your wisdom and your insight in terms of the police field. So it's kind of a macro, metaphysical, philosophical question, but I'm just struck by the wisdom that I see before me and why, and that we have to retain it somehow. Can we retain it structurally, contract-wise, legally-wise, union-wise?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a great question, and I would say that every time the contract expires and it's in limbo, which my time here with the city for 17 years, most of the time it takes a while for them to settle the contract. And in that period of time that the contract's being settled, we do have people who can retire because they're afraid they're going to lose something on the bottom line. And then people on the other side will leave because they're not happy with what their bottom line may be, right? But I would also say that retirements are way less when we do have a signed contract and things are moving in the right direction. And I'll give you an example. Even last year, where we did go through a lot, we had a change in chiefs a couple of times. We had, the Randy Cox situation. We had, officers shot. We had the Bristol officers killed. What from the standard with the city is where you have the pension buyback, only 20 people can take the pension buyback and they have to sign up. So at the beginning of last year, it's a very tough year, 30 people signed up. I said, for sure, 20 people are gonna die, right? Well, at the end of the year, only 12 people opted to leave. So not even the 20-minute, mandatory limit left, because we had a contract at least half the year. There was good talk about, possible raises, or we're gonna have a good contract. I don't know, I'm not gonna say it was the chief, but there was a lot of things that people decided to stay, right? But as that contract period goes longer and longer, we see the attrition start and people leave. Like, I think a lot of cops, when I first got here in 2007, you had 40-year people here, 30-year people here. And that came down to, they knew the next contract was gonna be okay. But those contracts weren't sustainable by the city, and I get that. So things have changed over the years. But I still say to you, even with what we have now, only 12 people left because they felt some sort of stability. So I think it's real important that there is something done. You know, a lot of unions in the city didn't have contracts. A lot are starting to get signed, and that's a good thing. But I think we see less people leave if there's a signed contract.
Before we take the next question, I'd like to acknowledge Alder Pro Tem just walked in, Alder Martian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one follow-up question. When you mentioned the agility test again, and when you mentioned your diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, is there room, it's a philosophical question because I'm speaking out of ignorance. Is there room for disabled people to become members of the police department?
Yeah, I mean, not as a police officer, but we definitely have jobs that can be done. We have a large civilian staff, and I think physical standards, and I didn't answer that question before, I apologize. It is a great question. I think some of the physical standards can change, but right now they're mandated by post, so we can't change them. I think what we have found, and I didn't mention this, and I apologize to Sergeant Finch, who's our recruitment guy. They have twice a week, they have sessions. They have people that aren't even in the process go to the sessions for training to prepare for the process. And I think that was important for us to have an outlet where we could say, okay, you didn't make it this time, but if you go to Sergeant Finch and it's Coach Davis, yes, I'm sorry, from the city, we can get you to that point. And we've seen people that never thought they could pass the run, and now they're passing the run and they become police officers. So we still need a physical agility. I could pass it, but I'm not mandated to. But you're right, as we go up in the years, I'm gonna do it against the mayor too, because he's challenged me. He's fast, but I can do more pushes. So we're not held, like us as officers, once you're on and you're in, you're not given any more of those tasks, right? So unfortunately, sometimes some of us let ourselves go, but it's also important to have that fitness. That's why we do basketball. That's why we do the basketball games, and we do the certain games. But my point is there is room. NYPD changed their fitness requirements. Other departments have changed their fitness requirements. I think that's going to be a wave of the future. But we have to be careful, because if you come in with physical fitness issues, overweight, heart issues, you're only going to end up getting hurt because it's an extremely physical job, you know. So I think there is room, there's wiggle room, so to speak, but not too much. I think there still needs a physical requirement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your questions. Are there any more questions at this time? Okay. I want to say thank you. Thank you for your very detailed presentation tonight. I want to thank you for what you do every day. And, you know, for every parent that lost a loved one, right? Mother, father, sister, brother. What can we do? Because, you know, we understand that y'all always on the front line and, you know, putting ourselves in harm's way. But what can we do as a board to support, to reduce the crime that's in New Haven that we love so much? I sit here in these meetings, and I don't believe I've ever seen so many alders participate in a public safety meeting. And I say that because we take it seriously. I say that because we love this city, such as you do, to be here for 20 years. And, you know, we want to know what we can do. right? And I know, because it was a theme tonight, I heard it very clearly, that you want more bodies, you want more people. But outside of that, what kind of strategy can we support on getting us to the place where we need to be? Best practice and financially,
So, I mean,
that's feasible.
I appreciate that question, that's important, and a lot of the alders do help. They call us, they talk to us, they talk about what their constituents are telling them. And a lot of alders have actually taken it one step further and helped us get to that constituent that witnessed something, that felt they couldn't talk to the police. And a lot of people on this board have helped us solve cases by doing that, right? And that's important. And I would say the biggest thing about that is the support of the police. You know, somebody, and when you ask that question, I think of this. My daughter's at the University of New Haven. She wants to be a New Haven police officer. And people say to me, "Oh, you want her to do that?" Yeah, I do. I'm very proud of that. And yeah, it's a dangerous job, but it's been my life for 25 years, 17 here, but you know, at the other location before. And it's about embracing to the police to the point where you would say, encourage a family member to be a police officer, encourage the police to be able to talk to people that don't want to talk to the police, and just promotion in a positive way, right? We have our problems, you know, but I think we can defend that by saying we look at the problems that have happened and we're accountable and we're transparent and we're good for the city. I want people to feel like this police department's good for the city, and that starts with people in power talking about how our police department's good for the city and moving in the right direction. We always want your input. We want to see you at community events. We want to see everybody at community events. The more people we can meet, the more positive interactions. The lieutenant said it the best, positive non-enforcement interactions, right? That starts with you guys too. And the more you can get the word out there and support your police department, the better your police department's gonna be.
Thank you so much. I just received a picture of, while I'm sitting here, of Miguel Pippin Jr. receiving his stripes to become a New Haven police officer. So we gotta keep pushing, keep doing what we have to do, so we can make it better and safer. So if there's no more questions, I'll just say thank you. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you very much for being on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, no, thank you.
Some of the alders said that they join with the dunk tank if the chief do it. So this is a workshop, so there won't be no public testimony right now, but if the committee wanna, you know, have a little discussion about what they heard tonight, if not, I'll take an adjournment to go home, it's up to you. You good? Good? Okay.
I make motion that we adjourn.
Second?
All's in favor?
Aye.
Discussion? Good night.